Welcome to the Healing While Discovering Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Michelle. I'm an intuitive transformational coach, certified life coach, certified NLP practitioner, and speaker. I've spent the last 22 plus years helping myself and my clients learn how to create their own happiness and live more abundant lives. In this time, I've also overcome and healed from child sexual molestation, a compulsive eating disorder, hunger, and homelessness. Now it's your turn to move forward with your life and heal from childhood traumas or past experiences. In this podcast, I'll share how I was able to overcome all of my past struggles, as well as my personal stories of overcoming jealousy, loneliness, resentment, and bitterness, and how I learned to forgive. I'll also help you explore your shadow self, deal with having low or no self-esteem, and address feelings of not being worthy or loved. Using my personal experiences and extensive training, as well as stories of grief, loss, depression, and anxiety from my guests, I'll help you change your life and finally heal. Welcome back to the Healing While Discovering Yourself podcast. And if you are new around here, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so excited for today's episode. First of all, I should say that I'm excited anytime and every time I interview someone on my podcast, because I think it's an honor and a privilege that people would say yes. I don't take it for granted that people are going to say yes to be a guest on my podcast, but I'm always honored when they do say yes, because that to me says that there is a level of trust, right? They trust that I'm going to hold them and support them 100%. But today is super special to me because and I am going to try not to get emotional, but if I do, it is what it is. But today's guest is so special to me. Number one, because of who he is. And you'll learn more about him when he begins to share his story. But just his being is so special, and he's so authentic and just an amazing guy. So that's the number one reason why I'm so excited about today. The second reason I'm excited is because he's actually the first male guest I had on this podcast. And for those of you who don't know, I had another podcast called Finding Bliss. I never had a male guest just because I didn't. So he's the first male guest on any of my podcasts. And he also happens to be the first male client that I have had. And Rene, I have to tell the story and then I'm going to get to you, but I just think I like to provide, a little context. So I have been called to work with men for about a year before I decided to do so. And I don't, I resisted. My higher self was like, you need to. My lower self, small self was like, no, don't do it, Andrea, blah, 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 whatever. So in November of 2020, I went on a retreat with some very special women who are now some of my closest friends. And I said to them publicly, I'm working with men. This is what I'm called to do, because they were like, Andrea, it feels like there's something that's holding you back. What is it? And I was like, working with men. So that was in November. Y'all, less than 2 or 3 days later, Rene inboxed me on Facebook and was like, I don't know what it is, but I want to work with you. He didn't even know what I had to offer. He didn't know anything. He was like, I'm following spirit. Spirit is telling me that I need to work with you. So Rene is so special to me in so many ways. But again, the number one reason why he's special to me is because he's a special human being. And I invited him on this podcast so that he can share his story. And when you learn about his story, I think you'll begin to embrace him just like I did and just know how special he is based on that. So welcome to the podcast, Rene.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you.
So Before we get off into your story, can you just kind of share a little bit about yourself? Whatever you want to share is okay with me.
So, yeah, my name is Rene St. Pierre III, and just the fact that I can sit here and cry and to say thoughts didn't go through my head of what other people are going to say would be complete bullshit. And and I don't give a fuck, because this is why I chose to work with Andrea.
Yeah.
Is it hasn't what do you say all the time? It wasn't all light and love.
Yes, love and light.
love and light for me to sit here and just cry.
Yeah.
I couldn't cry for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm, like I said, Rene St. Pierre III, and I grew up, I'm the third, named after my father, named after my grandfather. I grew up on the North Shore of Massachusetts, about 20 minutes north of Boston, to just, I'm a St. Pierre. My grandfather's one of 19.
Ooh.
So that's how I grew up with, I'm the third.
Yeah.
And that's grew up in a completely middle class, blue collar, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, do the right thing type of mentality.
Yeah.
And crying was not one of the things you do.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not something you do where I'm from. So that's what I was taught.
I love it. So, see, now do y'all see why I say that Rene is so special? Like, to be secure enough in his masculine energy and equally secure in his feminine energy to cry like that, right? And one of the things that I picked up from Rene, even just through like Messenger, was that this dude is so sensitive. And I know today we think of like sensitivity, especially sensitivity in men, like it's it's a bad thing. And it isn't. So Rene, can you just like you said, to be sitting here crying and having people, or thinking about what people will say, but from your beingness, how does that feel for you to be free enough, if the spirit moves you to cry?
It's not words to describe that feeling. It's what I saw when I shot heroin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's that feeling that I had when I hit the game-winning home run.
Yeah.
You can't describe that. You got to experience that.
Yeah.
Feel me? And I feel that freedom.
Yeah.
Somebody who once had completely given up his freedom to a substance is free.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, Rene, because you mentioned the heroin and you mentioned like the substance and like that feeling of freedom. Let's talk about your journey a bit. And I want you to, so for those of you who have kids who listen to the podcast, I will say that you might want to, if you censor like what your kids listen to, you might want to have them like leave the room, or maybe you can listen to it when you're free, because I don't censor my guests and I want them to come on here and speak freely and share their experiences. And so Rene is going to speak freely and share his experiences of the last 20 years of his life dealing with substance and drugs. And so this is Rene's experience and this is Rene's story. And so I don't want y'all to think that what he's saying is like, he's not generalizing anybody. This is his experience, and this platform is for him to share it freely. So now that that's out the way, Rene, what is your story?
What is my story? God, I would say that like I said, I grew up in a blue collar town, and becoming a drug addict was definitely not on the list of things to do.
Right. So let's start there. How did you get into drugs? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, basically what to sum it up is I was a 3-sport athlete, standout athlete. My whole life, my picture was in the paper. I was all state. I played 3 sports, excelling and being I was an all-star my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
My dad coached all my teams. My mom was there. My house was the hangout house. We had the pool parties after the games, after the all-star tournaments. So the way it ended up, it didn't start off that way. It was sports, and I was against drinking and against drugs. They diagnosed me as ADD in 7th grade, and my mother said, "You don't have ADD. You're lazy. Get off your lazy ass and read a book." And she was right. For me. Right. And I'm so glad she said that to me in 7th grade, because it became true for me at 43.
Wow.
So me getting into drugs and drinking, it was just a normal thing, and something I said I'd never do. Like I would assume most kids, especially athletes, no way.
Right.
Especially pills. I grew up in the 90s, and no way.
Right.
And it just sort of happened. I like to have a good time.
So do you remember the first time you tried drugs?
It was alcohol.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, I personally think the biggest lie in the world is that marijuana is a gateway drug.
Yes,
because I did shoot heroin, and it didn't start with marijuana. It started with alcohol.
Yeah.
And I would say normal keg parties. I was an athlete. I had a fake ID. I was always hustling. I was always selling candy in middle. It was always, something to make money. And then it was get a fake ID and you're having fun, and it was just fun. It was just fun.
Yeah. So from the time that you took your first drink to the time when you tried your first hard drug, what was the time frame between the two? Do you remember?
I mean, I was a late bloomer, I would say, as far as drinking. It was, freshman year. And I think the first time I drank, my buddy got jumped. We went to a keg party and my boy got jumped. And so it was a shit show from the beginning. I mean, I should have seen it then, but I didn't.
That seems to be a recurring pattern with that. The first time you try something, or within a short period of time, something crazy jumps off. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, looking back, I couldn't have told this story 10 years ago or even 2 years ago. It all came together when it came together.
Right.
But it started off harmless. It started off as, an athlete drinking after a game. And then I went to prep school and I tried a Percocet, and no big deal. And yeah, it was no big deal at first.
Yeah. So your first experiment with it was the alcohol. Then, like you said, you went to boarding school and you tried a Percocet. So it was pills at first, right?
It was,
or no?
I mean, it was drinking and weed, and I smoked a ton of weed, and I look back now and the shame that I had. I always knew there was some sort that cannabis was not the devil drug that they made it to be. And I always preferred that over alcohol. But in the 90s, you know, it's not the way it is now.
Right.
You're a criminal.
Right.
So from the rip, I'm a criminal at 15 years old because I want to smoke weed.
Yeah.
A choice I wanted to make.
Yep.
And looking back, you know what I mean? It all adds up now. But
Right.
it's like my choice is criminalized from the beginning. And somehow I guess, you know, like looking back, it's all hindsight, but where does this criminal identity come from? Well, shit, I can trace it back to the shame and guilt around smoking a joint.
Yes. Yes.
I couldn't have told you that 10 years ago.
Right.
You know?
Right. Right. Exactly. Because, you know, we can always, well, they say like hindsight is 2020, right? It's like when you're in it, you can't see it. But then when you look back, especially when you look back from like an elevated position, it's like you see all kinds of crazy stuff and you're like, whoa. Let's talk about, Rene, your experience in AA, alcoholic. Well, let me take a step back before we get off into that. So like one of the first things that we talked about, and just so y'all know, I asked Rene's permission if I could share certain things, and he said yes. So I'm not sharing things that he hasn't given me permission. And I think that's important because, as I said, he is my client. I am his coach, and I only share things with consent and permission. So one of the first things, like in our conversation, one of the first things that we talked about was kind of like, obviously childhood and like trauma came up, and you're like, what do you mean trauma? Like, I got no trauma, you know, because you were thinking about how you grew up in your frame of reference. Like it didn't seem that bad, but then you kind of had like some sort of like revelation where you were just like, oh my gosh.
I mean, this is just it. It started off as harmless fun. Because I'd like to ask anyone that knows me, I like to have a good time. And that was the problem. Or so I thought. Little did I know that, you know, to sum it up, 1999, I discover Oxycontin, and a girl breaks up with me, and I basically like find solace in opiates. Like it is an amazing feeling, you know. And in 1999, nobody really knew what Oxycontin was, and all my friends were doing ecstasy. Still to this day, I've never done ecstasy. It was like, you're doing this stuff that was made in a bathtub in France, and this is made in Stamford, Connecticut by a farmer's. It's got to be safe. Yeah. And I split an Oxy 40 with a buddy, and it was great. It was amazing. In a way, like, to completely tell the truth, it was like, this is what the Catholic Church was talking about. Holy smokes. And it's just, I don't know. It did something for me. It did something for me. And that led me down a path of self-destruction. But the interesting thing about my story is my life changed forever when I went for help.
Yes. Yes.
That's what's interesting to me now that I look back.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, it was probably about 2 years into my opiate use, 2001, and my parents, a buddy of mine, a real friend of mine said, hey, kid's got a problem. And my parents pulled an intervention, and I wanted to stop, and I went to detox, and the detox center happened to be in my hometown, like literally almost in my backyard. Like you could see almost to my house from this detox, which as a former, two-sport Division I athlete, how did I end up in a detox center in my hometown? What the heck? Yeah. I was a really good athlete that wanted out of his hometown. And the only way that I knew how to get out of my hometown was through my athletic ability. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I would assume a lot of men in this country.
Yes.
This is the skill I got, and this shit better pay the bills in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Because I want out. I want out of this place. And not that there's anything wrong with it, you know?
Right.
I just wanted out. I always saw bigger and better. And it was always every year from third grade on, it was, here we go, new start, new year.
Yeah.
And somehow I sabotaged that, whether it was just everything. There's been so many successes that I was about to jump off to where I shot myself in the foot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said, I had opportunities to play Division I and 2 sports on a high level. And, you know, with the help of some teachers from high school,
Right.
you know, that were against me, you know, looking back, I thought adults were adults. They're not necessarily.
Right.
And that affected me. And I was Proposition 48. And any athlete knows, oh, you don't want to be Prop 48.
Mm.
So I lost my eligibility for Division I scholarships, and I ended up Division III miserable. And I turned to drugs and alcohol. That's the simplest thing, and it worked until it didn't.
Mm.
And it worked until it didn't. And then I went for help.
Yeah.
And I guess they call it help.
Mm.
I thought I was getting help until I met Andrea.
Oh, that's so nice of you.
And that's not to stroke anyone.
That's not who you are.
That ain't me. But it's the truth. It's telling me what a no good, useless piece of shit I am was not support.
Yeah.
Telling me that I'm powerless and that I have a disease that I can't change.
Yeah.
At 23 years old.
Right.
And I just spent 22 years in the mud, in the system, really.
Mm-hmm.
Looking for help.
Yeah.
That I guess I got what I needed to get to where I got to.
Yeah. And when you say help specifically, you're talking about, is it a specific, like, is it AA? I know there's AA, GA, Al-Anon.
It's the entire system. You know, like I said, I couldn't tell this story 20 years ago, but as somebody that was a high achiever and excelled at everything he did, and when I put my mind to something, you better believe it was happening.
Yes.
It's happening.
Yes.
You can knock me down 500 times. I'm getting up 502.
Yes, you are.
It sort of walk into a place and they literally told me this, look to the left and look to the right. If one out of the three of you make it, you'll be lucky. And they start chanting things like jails, institutions, and death.
In the inside the places?
Oh yeah. And if you leave these meetings, you're going to drink or you're going to die, and you have to spend the rest of your life in a meeting because you have a disease that you're powerless to change. And that was pretty hopeless. And me being the arrogant kid that I was, I said, I'm going to be that 1 in 3. Shit, I don't ever fail unless I want to.
Right.
And that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
I failed miserably.
Yeah.
From 2001 until, I mean, I didn't fail because I had so many successes along the way, but I kept ending up in the system.
Yeah. 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 And from the very beginning, all you wanted was help. Because truth be told, I mean, obviously, like, nobody ever wants to be an addict. Like, I'm pretty sure people who are addicts, like, they didn't start their life by saying, I'm going to be an addict, right? And so from the very beginning, you were looking for help. And based on what you just shared, it didn't feel like help.
it felt really weird. I mean, and it's hard to say, but it was really weird. You know what I mean? Like people chanting things, and I have to say I am an alcoholic. I have to admit I am powerless. 23 years old, I don't know how powerful an I am statement is.
Right.
You feel me?
Yes.
So I buy in hook, line, and sinker. Okay, I am an alcoholic. Okay, I am powerless. Okay, let's do this.
Right.
Let's do this.
So, Rene, what do you say to people who said, because what I hear you saying is, obviously I'm paraphrasing, but like, if you would have known then what you know now, you wouldn't have been chanting, I am powerless, I am an alcoholic, I am this, jails and institutions. But let me ask you this, what do you say to people who have gone through, AA or that system, right? Because all of them are based from Bill Winston, his guidance and all of that. Right. So they really have the same, structure.
It's all Bill Wilson. It's all Bill Wilson's teaching. 90% of the treatment centers in the United States use a form of the 12 steps as originated by Bill Wilson.
Exactly. So what do you say? Thank you for that, because I know you've done a lot of research on this.
A lot of research.
Yes, that I know for sure. So what do you say to the people, Rene, who have successfully gone through AA and they say, well, me saying jails, institutions, and I am powerless and I am an addict, and what do you say to those people who say it's worked for me?
God bless you. Yeah, I believe you.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
I believe you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wow.
I honor your experience with that program, straight up.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm so truly happy for you.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't work for me.
It didn't work for you. Exactly. And I do have to say that, so Rene didn't really say this. So, and not only that, but this is Rene's first time publicly telling this story. So if it seems like I'm filling in the gaps, I'm only doing this to help Rene out. So
it's hard to summarize 43, I
know. So that's why I'm just filling in the gaps. So for y'all who are wondering, why is Andrea saying this? It's because this is the first time Rene is publicly sharing his experience. And as you can imagine, if you've ever shared anything publicly, how scary and frightening it can be. And then your nerves are going all over the place. So I'm just filling this in again with Rene's permission. So I'm not sharing anything that Rene hasn't given me permission to share. So that being said, Rene, you are sharing this perspective, your experience, not just from the perspective of being in the program, right? Like they say, a recovering addict, right? So you're not sharing only from that experience, but you're also sharing from the experience of someone who has actually run what they call a sober house.
Yeah.
Right.
I've done it. I dedicated my life to it, to find out 20 years later, for me, it's a complete con. It's a money-making con. Mm-hmm. Straight up. And not that people don't get better in that con. Right. They do. Mm-hmm.
So do you want to share why you how you came to that conclusion, some of your experiences, just so people know, have a better frame of reference?
Hold on, I'm blanking out. So let's ask me that question again.
That's okay, Rene. It's okay. Yep.
It's just there's so much. It's it's how do I summarize all of it? It's difficult.
Yeah, it is.
It's difficult.
Because you have so much experience.
Yeah, there's so many. It's and then my mind goes to, I've been in 100 different places.
Yeah.
So where do you want me to draw from? what state do you want me to draw from? Like, what age, what level of years of sobriety, of losing 130 pounds, of becoming a yoga teacher, of going back to get my psychology degree, of making millions, of losing millions, of making money in the stock, like, you know what I mean? What experience do we want to talk about? It's
you just did.
It's all bullshit. This is just it for me. And the thing is if you don't have insurance and you don't have money, there's no help. So they want to talk all this nonsense, these spiritual terms and God and this, that, and the other. And it's all, if you're on Daddy's Union plan and you got a gold card insurance plan that they can charge and just keep you going through. And the ones that they catch in the strainer that stay sober, they give the credit to the place. And it's a money making con.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Yeah.
And they tell me they care about me and they call help. It's emotional abuse. And it's no different than my experience in jail. You throw people in a room, in a cell, in a druggy buggy, and you don't offer them any help, and you release them to the public, and you wonder why we have what we have. And you criminalize my choice, and then you tell me it's a disease. Which one is it? Is it a disease? Is it a choice? Is it you know, like, does it matter the color of my skin? Does it not matter the color of my skin? Because when I was in treatment, fortunately, weren't many people not my color in there. So what's up with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I was in jail, there was a whole bunch of people of another color.
See?
So, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. But how I stayed out of jail all those years was I went to a doctor and got a legal prescription because I lived in South Florida where drugs were legal for 10 years. People don't know that. They just pulled the wool out from under you, and now they blame fentanyl. Well, something created this whole thing.
Yes.
And if you think people didn't know about it, you didn't live in Broward County, Florida.
I think one of the strongest statements or memorable statements that you said to me was, I felt safer in a drug house than I did in a treatment center.
Yeah, that's my experience. I know the rules of the street. And in these meetings, in these treatment centers, these people said, you know, talking spiritual or not talking spiritual terms, and the slimiest, grimiest things I've ever seen have went down in these so-called recovery communities that are supposedly safe places, and they're not safe. In my experience, listen, I ran the streets from 15 to 35. And there's certain rules that you play by. And that doesn't happen. And when people are sober, it gives you an excuse. You can snitch. You can. It's like, and I get it about telling on somebody if the possibility of someone dying. I get all that, but all this stuff has been weaponized. And yeah, a lot of gaslighting. This, I went back to school for psychology, and you can't win an argument. Like, if you don't admit you're powerless, if you don't go along with the treatment, what's it called? Whatever the treatment protocol that they have for you, and based on how much money your mommy and daddy have, they're going to run you for it. And like, I have tons of trauma from being in treatment. And fortunately, I didn't have insurance because those are the kids that had it the worst.
What do you mean by that?
You're just getting pimped out. And you just learn how to play the game, and you're just in and out of these places and the things that go on. And these places are completely unregulated.
Oh, really?
You know, like, there's no oversight, there's no nothing. And I don't know if people know this, but because you stop using drugs and alcohol and you're sober, that doesn't mean you're a good person.
Yeah.
And I ended up around a whole bunch of people that were sober and not good people, but claiming that they were spiritual, claiming that they were helping people, claiming that they could help you, be recovered, and claiming all these terms that Bill Wilson himself created because he was a master manipulator. He set up with a plan to die a millionaire, and he did.
Hey loves, are you looking for a safe place to hang out while you're healing with other like-minded individuals? If so, then I would love for you to join my private Facebook community called Healing While Discovering Yourself, named after the podcast. This community is for those who are truly seeking a safe place to heal and also show up authentically. If this interests you, then I'm going to invite you to go to Facebook/groups/healing while discovering. I look forward to seeing you in the group. Tony Robbins said, the quality of your life is a direct reflection of the quality of the questions you're asking yourself. And that's why I'm inviting you to download my free guide called 5 Powerful Questions to Ask Yourself to help you take back control of your life. In this guide, you will learn how to shift your mood, break negative thought patterns, and identify beliefs and stories so that you can explore the truthfulness of these stories. Go to andreamichelle.com/powerful to download this free guide